For the past few years, we've had an influx of Resident Evil and Silent Hill inspired horror games coming out of the indie woodwork. It's not unlike the wave of boomer shooters that came out thanks to the success of Doom 2016, but the things they have in common are also the same things that make it harder for them to stand out more. One such game that I'll be talking about today is Daymare 1998, a survival horror game inspired by the old school Resident Evil games, with inventory management, resource allocation, combat decisions that can make the difference between life and death, and Resident Evil style puzzles that fans will appreciate. But there is one very unique case about this game that stands out from the rest of the ones that I have seen, and it dates all the way back to its origins. About 7 or so years ago, Invader Studios were actually working on a project called Resident Evil 2 Reborn, a fan-made remake of the original RE2 that would recreate the entire experience but in a third-person camera. It was very rough on the surface, but it looked incredibly promising, and this was long before Capcom had officially had the idea to go back to their survival horror roots like they did with RE7. Speaking of which, Capcom had taken notice of this project and had invited them back to their HQ in Osaka, which ultimately led to the cancellation of the RE2 Reborn project due to Capcom's wishes for them to stop it. But Capcom were impressed with what they were able to achieve, and with some advice and teachings passed over in regards to game development, Invader Studios were encouraged to create their own game, using the experience that they had gained over trying to remake RE2, one of the best survival horror games ever made. They took the bones of their old project and created Daymare 1998, which would be their tribute to RE2 itself and would be, in my opinion, one of the more standout titles inspired by the Resident Evil franchise. The story begins with a team from a division called Hades, part of Hexacorp, which is the game's version of Umbrella basically, even down to the outfits of the soldiers that look pretty similar. You get sent inside a facility to retrieve a sample and well, if you've played these games before, you know what's going to happen anyway. Everything goes to shit, and you're fighting off mindless zombies and other monstrosities, as well as dealing with some challenging puzzles along the way. After you escape, the situation gets even worse. You crash, and before you know it, the nearby town gets the Raccoon City treatment, and we now get the perspective of another character called Samuel, a park ranger with a strange condition that makes him hallucinate, and of course another character who was on board the helicopter when it crashed. It's pretty standard fare, even for Resident Evil standards. Biohazards running amok, due to experiments gone terribly wrong, and events are being influenced by bigger forces at hand. And like in the original RE trilogy, it gives you optional reading material that isn't essential, but does give more background context to this game's world and setting. It also adds audio tapes that you can find, hearing the voices of others and what has happened during their last moments. This game does, however, make an attempt to make a somewhat interesting story, and somewhat makes up for it in the post-credit scene where you get the full picture of what's really going on. The setting is largely pulled from the original games, even down to the nighttime misty atmosphere of the mansion as well as Raccoon City from RE2. You have several sections that you visit throughout the campaign: the hospital, the Hades laboratory, the town of Keen Sight, the sewers, and another lab located near the dam. All very Resident Evil-like with its selection of puzzles and monster scenarios to deal with. At its core, it's very much like its main source of inspiration, because it quite literally was supposed to be RE2 in the beginning. So if you've played that game before, then this game is going to feel very similar. Puzzles are either logic-based, or some like the Greek puzzle that are easier to solve if you already know the alphabet. There's lots of them in each chapter, but it's not like it's trying to make you solve a 5x5 Rubik's Cube or something. You just do what you've done before in the other Resident Evil games and move forward. The same goes with managing enemies. On the higher difficulties, resources are more scarce, and most of the time you'll have to find a way around an enemy, or kill the ones that will get in your way if you need to backtrack. Weapons have a timed crosshair where waiting long enough increases the potential for a critical shot to the head, especially if you're using a handgun. The weapons themselves are pretty limited here. You have 2 pistols, a shotgun, an SMG, and 2 magnums. But one particular function about them that I quite liked are the use of magazines. They are treated as an actual resource and inventory slot, and you need to have 1 or 2 ready in the event that you need to reload. If you don't have a magazine for the gun, you can't use it again until you find one. Oh, and when you're reloading fast, you better pick it up once the fight is done because you drop it when you do so. You can, however, slow reload, which replaces the empty magazine for another, but then you have to fill that empty one with ammo, which you do with combining. However, there is a quick slot option that you can use to hasten the process. This mechanic also extends to healing items, or items that enhance perception or stamina when you're meleeing enemies. In each chapter you can find bobby heads that are hidden, which are added to your collection in the menu. You have save points, save rooms, that you have to look for, as well as secret rooms with resources that you can use. Another useful item is the override tool, where you can use it to hack doors or cabinets with a time sequence that is brain dead easy, even when it says very hard. It's literally just timing. The save terminal lets you store items or trade for other items provided that you have the one it requires, and of course to save your progress. You do also have autosave, but it's a good habit in these games to make sure that you're keeping track of your saves and your progress anyways. There aren't a huge variety of enemies. You have zombies, the bigger ones, the ones that throw toxic sludge, tougher versions of the bigger guys, and of course the final boss of the game. Personally, I don't mind it too much. It keeps the biohazard setting more grounded and doesn't go up its arse like the way Resident Evil Village does. I've never heard of a virus that lets you turn into a flock of birds like the way Mother Miranda does. Anyway, it's mainly humanoid creatures or grotesque zombies. Simple but perfect for me, to be honest. But even still, they can put up a fair challenge. Zombies are quite fast and can grab onto you pretty easily, but if you're lucky with your crits, you can put them down fast. But other times they can take up to 4 shots to the head with even just a pistol, which is why a shotgun, or if you're really desperate, a shot to the head with a magnum always helps. The bigger foes take more punishment, which is where your power weapons come in, but ideally if you can avoid them or go around them, then that is generally the smarter thing to do. Especially when you come across fights that you have to take on later, and you need all the ammo that you can get. I will say though, the AI can be pretty inconsistent here. They have the vision of an eagle eye, but in darker areas they just stop on their tracks completely once you're far enough. And sometimes I've even been able to go past them unnoticed. It's something that should be looked at with a future patch, because it can be a deal breaker when you're looking for immersion in a survival horror game. Graphically it looks okay. It's nothing really groundbreaking, but the environments here are pleasant. Invader Studios really nailed the 90s vibe of the game due to its setting. The atmosphere is also pretty spot on too. It's apparent that when you play this game, the team knew what they were doing here, and they had a fundamental understanding of the original RE2. The same feeling could also be felt in this game. Although it's not perfect, mind you, it's a decent effort here. The character models look alright, except for the faces. I like the Hades outfit, which reminds me of Hunk from the Umbrella Squad, but the faces, like I said, look atrocious. And the voice acting is even worse. I don't know if it was intentional, but the voice acting is really off-putting, and some of the characters don't match their voices at all.
The screen for the terminal display.
What? Listen, Doc. I am done playing your fucking dirty little games. All I've been doing this whole time is implicating myself in whatever the hell crimes you've committed here by erasing evidence. I do not take kindly to being blackmailed by weirdo fucks in puffy white coats, and I ain't your damn puppet! My role as your accomplice in this fucked up horror tale ends now. I'm heading your way, Doc. And when I get there, you'll do well to give me exactly what I risked my ass for in this godforsaken labyrinth.
Close my eyes, I can still see him. He's burning up and screaming for me to somehow help him. And I can't.
I know, but sometimes you just gotta move forward. Let go and focus on the present moment. You cut through that storm with your fangs out. You got golden hands, kid. I'm impressed. And now that your scars are more or less healed, I'm sure you go back to flying solo any day now.
Anyway, I think it's safe to say that one of our own stole some research and covered the whole up as an accident, obscuring all evidence of their damnable theft.
Huh. You don't say. I'm gonna need that fancy ID card of yours to access the server.
Well, why? Why do you want to access the server? I thought you were actually here to rescue us.
Technically, those were your words, not mine. Sorry, bud. Orders are orders.
But what about the others? All the survivors in the building? You're not gonna let us die here.
Nah, you're right. I guess I can. I mean, especially you. Oh, what the heck. I'll lend a hand.
Liev and Raven may have been the only ones that did, but characters like Samuel and Sandman, holy shit, it's like RE1 levels of voice acting here. In saying that, it does have an unintentional charm to it. The original trilogy also had really bad voice acting, but it was like fun cheese. It reminded you that it was still a game at the end of the day, and was for what it was at the time. Just don't expect any game awards for voice acting on this one. and that's Daymare 1998, a game that was originally meant to be the remake that Capcom wouldn't do at the time until they decided to step in and force Invader Studios to cancel the project. Which honestly worked out for the better anyways, because we got a bigger and better version of an RE2 remake by Capcom in 2019, and Invader Studios could start off their own survival horror series that has the spirit of RE2 behind its back. It's a very flawed game, janky in many parts, but does have an interesting story, nice monster designs, atmospheric environments and music, and also includes some extra content like the Hades End mode, where you complete objectives in each level in the quickest time possible, with a special mode that includes random properties, adding more challenge to the level. There's also a prequel that's planned to come out sometime in 23 called Daymare 1994 Sandcastle. After playing this one, I'm actually looking forward to seeing what this studio has in store for the future, as well as the upcoming Daymare game. If you're looking for a Resident Evil inspired survival horror game, then Daymare 1998 is a game worth checking out. Thank you for watching.